Hi all, today we're going to be talking about the Vanu Sovereignty Submachine Gun Directive. In short, the Vanu Sovereignty Submachine Gun Directive is okay, the reward is not that good, but it's still alright, and the weapons within the directive itself are just kind of okay. It's not a bad directive, it's just a very forgettable one that doesn't need to be treated with any urgency, as the reward, the Skorpios, is not particularly good, and the unique gimmick it has just isn't super useful on it. But it is a relatively fine directive. The weapons in here are pretty alright. They're nothing super special, unfortunately, but they're pretty fine. They're just not super amazing. Honestly, I would consider it a fairly low priority directive for Vanu, but if you really like submachine guns and you really like playing Vanu, it's fine. It's just, you're better off picking, say, the NC submachine gun directive or a different weapon directive on Vanu, if you're just looking for a directive award. So, in the way of submachine guns, you have quite a few available to you here, and some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are just mediocre. Unfortunately, because Vanu doesn't have super good submachine guns of its own, you're probably going to have to use a Filename Systems one. So, starting with the Eridani. I really like the Eridani. It's very easy to use, and it has a slightly longer max damage range compared to other submachine guns, which is very nice. The problem is, compared to stuff like the Cyclone and the Armistice, the other first-generation submachine guns, the damage output is relatively low. It's fine, it's just, unfortunately, the damage output on it isn't super good. For example, the Punisher kills faster than it does. And outside of having this little bit more range than the submachine guns, there's not really anything special about it. It's fine, I think it's worth putting the medal on, but it's not something super amazing. If nothing else, it will set you up for the Skorpios quite well, but it's just kinda okay. You could skip it, but I would honestly recommend doing it because it's good, it's just not anything special. The MKV is alright. The MKV is actually my favorite NS submachine gun, and, well, at the end of the day, it's really just a PDW that's had a suppressor put onto it. Which means that if you like the PDW and you want to Diraxium a second PDW, you can. Outside of that, it is not very good. Unfortunately, it has fairly low damage output. It's not as good at range as the PDW itself is, and other than that, it's just kind of mediocre. I like the MKV, but it's not a very good submachine gun, and you can pretty safely skip it if you'd like to. The Punisher. I have not used this gun at all on Vanu. But the Punisher is good. Most people like using it. It's fine. It's a pretty good submachine gun. Honestly, it should be in your lineup here. I didn't like it when I Raxiumed out an NSO, but it's still worth your time. It's still a good SMG that has some versatility available to it if nothing else, and given your other options here, it's one of your better ones. The PDW is pretty okay. It's a good filler, but that's really all it is. Unfortunately, it's really just going to feel like an Eridani that has slightly more range for worse damage output. Because that's kind of what it is. It has more range than other submachine guns, but the damage output on it is so poor that it's hard to justify using it, except as a filler. It's okay, I just personally would not recommend doing it unless you absolutely have to. The Tengu is shit, skip it, it's bad, it is terrible, I've talked about this gun too many times, it is so awful, it's not worth your time in any which way. The Sirius is an absolute must-have. I would personally argue it's the best submachine gun available to the Vanu, and, it's an 845 at 125 SMG, which means you're putting out pretty good damage, and you get a 50-round magazine. Which means you basically get to take extended and a laser, which is awesome. It's also got a fairly easy-to-control recoil pattern, it's comfortable to use, it's just really nice. It should absolutely be in your lineup, but it's still not amazing. It is still down on damage output compared to some of the first-generation submachine guns, but it's still pretty good. It's still a very good mix of damage and magazine. I would absolutely recommend doing it. It also has a cool firing animation, which, should be reason enough for you to Raxium it. The Canis is tricky. Now, I completed my submachine gun directive before the Canis is in the game. I'll make that clear. Basically, the way the Canis works is it starts at 600 RPM and spools up to 667. So, on the first shot, you're looking at a 600 at 167 weapon, and it takes about half a second or so to spool up. It's not bad, but it's kind of weird. It's fine, but it's not as strong as it can be until you've got the whole magazine spool up. And in that regard, you can lose engagements. It's not bad. I would probably recommend putting the metal on it, but it's just okay. It's not anything super special. Which brings us to the directive reward. The Skorpios. I made a video on this gun. I don't think it's that good. Because at the end of the day, the Skorpios is basically just the Eridani, but you get a heat mechanic. That is exactly what it is, in fact. The problem is, heat doesn't actually really matter on submachine guns that much, because you are generally playing submachine guns on Infiltrator, and even on other classes. Submachine guns already have quick reload speeds. Also, with the small magazine size of 25 rounds, it's really hard to sustain the gun, like, say, with the Beetlegeese, where you can keep sustaining it so long as you're checking your sights between kills. You know, you can basically sustain a Beetlegeese up forever, because if you know what you're doing, you'll never have to stop to reload it. The problem is, at 25 rounds, the Skorpios you can't do that with, because you just simply don't have enough ammunition to work with. And you're an Infiltrator. You can just cloak and press the R key. In addition, you can't take extended mags on it, so if you like running your Eridani with extended mags, you're now at a 10-round disadvantage to the Eridani. It's not bad, but it does feel relatively pointless as an unlock, because it really doesn't feel like it does anything that the Eridani doesn't already do. It is essentially just a shiny Eridani, because heat doesn't matter on this weapon. I've not run into one situation with this gun where heat has actually mattered. And in that regard, if you really want the Skorpios experience, you can just use the Eridani. Sure, it doesn't have heat, but it's the same gun otherwise, and it's honestly better. They're about the same in total effectiveness. Your heat can save you, but it will happen less than 5% of the time. It's not a big feature, and realistically, you don't need infinite ammo on a submachine gun. You've already got 200 rounds of spare in the Eridani, which should be more than fine, especially if you're an Infiltrator. You should be able to find a resupply terminal or an ammo pack or something. So, it's not bad, it's not really worth anything. It just doesn't really bring anything to the table that you can't already do with the Eridani. And, honestly, the Sirius is just better. And that's the unfortunate reality. Sure, you have decent submachine guns in here. Sirius, Eridani, Punisher, Candace are all fine Araxiums. And you only need 4 of them because it's submachine guns. But the Skorpios isn't a desirable unlock. It's not like a Beetlegeese or an Eclipse, where they're actually desirable unlocks because of the gimmicks they bring to the table. It's just an Eridani that has heat that you can't take extended mags on. Which means you really just have an Eridani with a small magazine size. It's just, there's not really a point to it. I mean, sure, you unlock the banner, and I like the banner. In fact, I've run the banner ever since I unlocked it on this character, because it was my first directive that I completed. But honestly, you can pretty safely skip this one unless you're really, really into submachine guns. Like, unless you're absolutely in love with the Eridani, there's no rush to get the Skorpios. It's just not interesting enough or strong enough as a weapon to warrant actively chasing. Unless you're really into submachine guns, in which case just play NC instead. All the NC ones are so much better. So, thank you, and I will see you all later tonight, actually. Bye.